talking today with AudrieAna and Tamara, and the focus of our conversation as therapists is really looking at cross-cultural relationships. So thanks for carving out the time, ladies.
Thanks so much, Emily. I'm excited about the conversation.
Yes, Me too. Me too. Well, let's just start by clarifying the obvious, but again, let's just clarify it. Tamara, what really constitutes a cross-cultural relationship?
Yeah, sure. I thought it would be helpful to start with maybe describing what culture means, and then move from there, since it's kind of a nebulous term. But for me, culture is a shared set of rituals, beliefs, practices, and norms that are explicitly, or maybe even more importantly, implicitly expressed across a group to form a collective identity. Of course, each culture is not homogeneous, and there will be significant within group differences. Yet culture can influence anything from how we view time, to food, to emotional expression, family structure, language, communication. And so a cross-cultural relationship is simply when the self-identified culture of each person differs from the other.
Boy, that is so vast. Thank you for sharing that. In preparing for our conversation, I was just curious and I thought, okay, how significant of a portion are cross-cultural couples today in our world and in our country? And it looked like actually there's like an average of 700,000 newlyweds this year that are saying they are a cross-cultural couple. So it's certainly a significant portion of couples today, and it's on the rise. So, AudrieAna, this has been an area of interest for you as a therapist who works with couples, and I'm just curious, where that interest came from.
It just came naturally because I was born into it. So I was born into a cross-cultural relationship between my parents. So my father is an immigrant from Mexico. His dream was to practice medicine in the United States, and he made that a reality. And when he was here, he met my mother, who was born and raised in the United States. And what that meant is I grew up in a very cross-cultural home where it was a bilingual home. My father didn't speak English very well, and my mother taught him how to speak English, and he taught her how to speak Spanish. And then they raised us in a bilingual home. I wasn't allowed to speak English in the home until I was 14 years old. So, and then, that meant, just like Tamara, your description is so great. The food, the music, the family members coming in and out of the country to stay with us going to Mexico to stay with them. So it permeated every part of my life. I realized in high school that my parents had a strained relationship. That's when the differences really became troublesome. And I think the cultural divide had a lot to do with it because of role expectations for women and men at that time. But I have many rich memories of my parents and enjoying both cultures. And, I saw the differences, but there was a lot of beauty in the difference. So, that's why it's a sweet place for me to reflect on and work with couples who have that difference, because I know it is a lot to overcome sometimes.
Fascinating, AudrieAna, that you were not speaking English until you were a teen as the predominant language in your home. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, well, when my dad wasn't home, we snuck in the English. So, as teens will do, as kids will do.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. I knew you were a very smart lady, but that's amazing. So, it is so vast. It touches so many areas of a couple's partnership. And Tamara, how about for you? How did this become more of an issue for you in your service to couples?
Yeah, I think similar to AudrieAna, there's a special personal relatability for me on a few different levels. One is I grew up as a second generation immigrant in Toronto and have the experience of straddling two different cultures. So my Sri Lankan heritage, as well as the Canadian culture that was around me at the time. And then I moved to the US as an adult and can relate with some of my clients who are also navigating the complexities of the immigration process and learning the systems of a new country, which is an added stressor to any relationship. And of course, I am in an intercultural relationship. I met my husband when I moved to the US. He grew up in a rural suburb of Louisville, Kentucky, and I grew up in one of the most diverse cities in the world. So there were some significant differences in the cultures we were steeped in.
Wow. Thank you both for sharing not only your personal interests and stories, but also just, your professional passion then to really find ways to bridge differences and to enrich couples' lives even more so. So we've touched on them a little bit, but what would you say, Tamara, are some of the challenges that emerge specifically to a cross-cultural relationship?
Yeah, this is such a good question. I think partly because all couples experience some similar challenges of navigating differences, but there's a special kind of pressure highlighted for cross-cultural relationships. We all inherit cultural defaults, which may be for the most part neutral. However, the challenges come when we start to begin to assign value judgments on top of those defaults. So this is the way I've been raised, this is how I've been taught to view the world, and therefore it is good and correct, and any other way is wrong or bad. And it can become especially tricky when these differences begin to be perceived as a threat. Either there's something wrong with us, we're not as aligned as I thought we would be, or there's something wrong with you and I need to fight tooth and nail to preserve what matters to me, or even there's something wrong with me and I need to fold or hide aspects of myself or change in order to keep us comfortable. Yeah, another big one is when we begin to interpret our partner's actions and words and behaviors through our own cultural lens. For example, I had one couple where one partner was from a more stoic, less expressive culture, and the other partner was from a very expressive culture. And the first partner would become overwhelmed by the other partner's big expressions, and then the other would assume that their partner's lack of expression meant disapproval or disdain, or they just don't love me.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a really great example. And I really like the way, both of us as couples therapists, are doing a lot of the same work with our couples who aren't in a cross-cultural relationship. But there is this lens of the way I do things is kind of the way everyone should do things. And we have difficulty with difference. And I like the way you said that having a different culture, being partnered with someone from a different culture adds that other layer, but we're still using all of the skills and principles and theories of couples therapy. We just need to be remembering that lens and helping the couple acknowledge these differences. Many times it's language, particularly if one person speaks more fluently in the language of the country where they're residing. They sometimes are relied upon in a way to carry the family, and that's an added pressure. I think another challenge is role expectations. That's what I grew up seeing, just this really big difference between women and men and children. And also the role of extended family. In some cultures, extended families are almost a part of the primary family unit. We had family members come and live with us for long periods of time. And, in American culture, that's not as common. And so I think extended family, also how it's viewed, can be either a problem or it could be a wonderful gift, depending on how the couple looks at it. I think religious differences is also, but that's true for any couple.
Yes.
But I think in cross-cultural, you've got the religion and the culture really are intertwined. And so sometimes that can show up. I had a couple who both spoke the same language. One was from an English-speaking European country, and that was his primary language. And the woman was from the United States, but political differences, there was a lot in the culture between the two of them and the way they viewed government and the role of government and the role of citizens that became a real hot button in our couples sessions. And so here they were, same language, but really different cultural perspective on government and on our role. And then another huge difference is like rituals and holidays and how we do that, right? Those are very different as well.
Oh, these are such rich points because you're right. In any relationship, when you come together and get serious or make a life commitment to someone, you do start seeing, what's compatible, what were the unarticulated areas of norms. You don't always know when to talk about that in your courtship process. So I'm just curious, at what point do both of you ladies think couples should be talking more about rituals and holidays and family norms and wow, how did your dad treat your mom? And, some of that, like, when do you start doing that? And when would it kind of be too late to do that you maybe haven't built enough together? Tamara, any thoughts off the top of your head?
Yeah, that's a great question. Earlier is always better. I hesitate to say that there's a too late. I'll let you kind of speak to that too, AudrieAna. Earlier is always better. I do notice that most of the rub, kind of like you alluded to, AudrieAna, tends to be with extended family, navigating relationships with one another's families of origin. And then also when couples begin thinking about raising children together, that's when a lot of, is it my culture versus your culture? When that shows up. So ideally, prior to that, would be good to start reflecting on what are some of the things that I'm bringing in from my history? What are some things that I can learn about your history and how you might view the world because of your experiences? Mm-hmm. And what does that mean for our now shared life?
Yeah, I agree. I think just like any other couple, when they get together, those first couple years, in couples language, we call it symbiosis. We call it like togetherness. We're looking at all the things that draw us to one another. And in the beginning, the differences usually are what draw us to one another. There's something in the other person that we see like, oh, that speaks to me. I want that. We didn't have that in our family. We really love this about this other person. So people usually are drawn to the difference and they are in love with the difference. And then at a certain point that changes and it becomes like, now I'm annoyed with the difference. And I think getting couples to see that this is normal. This is the normal process of any relationship, cross-cultural or not. And just really helping them say, we've got to talk about these things. And I agree with Tamara. It's the sooner the better. We just know in the beginning, they're just loving the differences and not seeing that it would be any problem at all because I'm in love, Yes. And so I think, you don't want to burst their bubble, but I do think that talking about expectations and acknowledging them as soon as you can is important. And I agree with Tamara. I mean, I don't think we'd be couples therapists if we thought that it was ever too late. That, we're never giving up on a couple. We've seen couples go from a really unhappy, dissatisfied state to flourishing after a lot of hard work. So we're not ever going to say it's too late to start talking about this.
Yeah. The one thing that I will add to that, AudrieAna, is it's normal, like you mentioned, and also acknowledging that sometimes there are going to be differences that will never be resolved. And that tension will just always be there, and that's okay. Or at least the couple can decide, is that okay?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Can we withstand the tension of this difference and let it be okay?
Yes.
Yeah. I love what you ladies are saying because yes, love is blind, right? In any culture, love is blind. And then at some point, sometimes the things that drew us to one another end up being the friction points in any dynamic. And so it's so wonderful to be able to normalize that, even if you are dealing with something that is more even cross-cultural, because we know difference is beautiful and it adds so much to life and to families. So if a couple comes in and is talking with either of you and they'd like just some basic strategies to really weave their stories together more, to take their two unique cultures and really bring them together more. How do you navigate that? What are some of your favorite strategies to bring to those couples?
What we do with every couple. But again, when you have a therapist who really understands, even from a personal perspective, the intricacy of adding the cultural component, but really just foundational things in couples therapy. And the first one is create safety in the communication between the two. I mean, really, when a couple comes into my office, I want to have it be a very safe place, because if we can't have safe, effective communication, it's going to be really difficult to talk through some really important things. So I would say that is a primary importance. And it really takes us all, myself included, in my own couples work with my husband, like it takes a while to really figure out, like, what am I saying that might hurt my partner? I don't understand that it would hurt my partner, but I need that feedback from him, and he needs the feedback from me, so that we can communicate in a way that it helps us both. So I think just creating safety in communication is the first thing I put. And then when you have that safety, then the next C for me, and that would be the letter C, would be curiosity. To get a couple to be curious and not assume what the other person is thinking, needing, assume what their culture, like, well, oh, all the men in your culture are that way. Well, no, 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 no. This is the one man that you have, right? Let's find out from him what he's thinking and feeling. So I think curiosity, which means we have to set aside our judgment. It means we have to set aside our stereotypes, and that can be hard. So, I mean, those are the first two that came up. I'll let Tamara talk for a bit.
That's good, AudrieAna. Just jumping off your last point is making me think of, I think it's Dr. Becky Kennedy, who in her work with parents and children, but this can be applied to partners, is using the most generous interpretation, which is the opposite of assuming the worst. I'm going to give my partner the benefit of the doubt here. I don't have complete certainty about what they're meaning. I know how it's hitting me, but I don't want to assume the worst in them in this moment. A couple things that I would add to what you just described, AudrieAna, is one, starting from or revisiting how did we get together to begin with? What drew us to one another? What is shared between us? I think it becomes easy once we begin to notice the differences to see them everywhere, and then to forget what are the things that are aligned in our desires for our life and our values for our family. I would also say for each partner to take time to really reflect on what is most important to me. What are the aspects of my history that I would like to hold on to and stay engaged in, even if my partner chooses not to participate? So again, holding on to what is meaningful to me, and then trying to be flexible about the rest, which is really hard. And that may look like, can I engage in or participate in practices that are important to my partner, even if they're not my preference? This to me is the hallmark of being a solid, flexible self. Many therapists use this language. I'm borrowing from David Snarsh's definition. I am not so flexible that I'll completely lose myself and all that matters to me in the presence of my partner, but not so rigid that I cannot be open to new experiences and new ideas. I'm secure enough to be thoughtfully changed and challenged.
I would love to give an example of what you're talking about, Tamara. I'm working with a couple right now where they go back to her home country, and they usually do that once a year. And it's usually quite stressful for the husband, who is not from that country. It's just such a stark contrast because it's a long distance. They go for like 2 weeks. So it can be a little overwhelming, but he knows how important it is for their child and for her family. And recently she's got some need to go back a couple more than once. And they have agreed that she's going to go and he's not going to go. And it's not that he's not wanting to be supportive. He's just saying, I think that's the one time is all I can do. but I'm fully supportive of you going, no guilt. And so she's going a little more often. And that's, I think, what you're talking about, the flexibility to be able to honor what your needs are and be in touch with your family who might be miles and miles away. But as a couple, not taking it personally, that would be doing that 2 or 3 times a year for him would really be overwhelming. So I like your example of that.
So you both have kind of already answered my other question, but are there other strategies that you recommend to couples to bring more of their uniqueness, to bring that together and not leave it behind, but to find a way to really embrace more of their diversity together and form, their own story culturally?
Yeah, I do want to say that in spite of kind of the unique challenges that intercultural relationships can have, there is a lot of opportunity for each partner to expand themselves in ways that they may not have otherwise had the opportunity. So that's a really cool and encouraging thing about particular relationships. And I love your question, because your question also kind of has part of the answer in it. There's research on couples embracing what's called cultural inclusion to create a third culture. And so that's pulling in pieces and elements of one another's heritage in a way that's unique and creative to each couple's household or relationship. And it's never going to be this perfect puzzle piece that fits together just right, but it will be creative.
Mm-hmm. I like that piece too. I love this question, Emily, and I like what you're saying, Tamara, and something that I'm doing with all my couples. It's a little bit new for me, but I'm finding it really helpful is I'm having them create a vision statement for their relationship. So I think in a cross-cultural relationship, that's very, very helpful. It's helpful in all relationships to say, what am I wanting? What do I want from this marital relationship, this coupleship, and really owning that, and then having the other person create their own, and then looking at them side by side and say, what are we joining together? Which one of these are we joining together and is now our vision statement? It's really important. I also think another thing, I think that's so important because extended family does play a big role, I think, sometimes in these relationships. And just like in other couples, we need to sometimes quiet that noise so that we can really build something together. So I think that can be a helpful exercise for a couple. And then it's kind of your North Star. Whenever you get off track, you can say, hey, but we said that we were going to do this. The other thing I think is super helpful is to not have one culture trump the other and to really acknowledge the beauty and the richness that they bring to the partnership. And that needs to be communicated to the children, that both of these cultures are beautiful and rich, and we are going to support one another in living within maybe a new cultural context, one that celebrates that. What I saw that happened with my parents was the extended family from either side really fell in love with the extended family from the other side. And I think that educating your extended family on your partner's culture, or having them step in and do that and bringing them together, is so, so helpful. And I found that a very beautiful thing. And then I think the last thought I had was talk together to see what are the things we want to leave behind. What are the things we don't want to bring into this relationship because of maybe our family trauma? Maybe there were things that happened within that context or that culture that we don't want to see show up in our relationship, and acknowledge that. And that's okay, because you're creating what you want. And some of those things that I came up with was, patriarchy versus matriarchy. That's something that can come up. Religious practices that people are uncomfortable with or have had difficulty with, like political views on finances, even alcohol use, or, sometimes there are things that within a couple, it's okay to say, hey, I love my culture, and but this is the one thing that was really hard for me. And I don't want to bring that forward in this relationship, and have healthy communication around that. I don't know. Tamara, did you have anything?
No, I think that's great. That sums up a lot. I love what one of my intercultural couples described to me recently, and I heard this image used a lot recently of the soup you're cooked in. This one couple was describing, if I'm cooked in a chicken soup and then I remove all the chicken, the carrot is still going to be flavored a little bit like the chicken. And so keeping in mind, that's a great image for, we can't erase our history. We can't erase how we were raised and our experiences growing up, but we can draw our attention to them and be aware of them and mindful of what's coming in with us as we walk into new experiences and new relationships.
Yeah, I like how you said that.
I love how you said that, Tamara. Yeah. Well, ladies, thank you so much for sharing your personal and your professional insights and your wisdom to help couples every day to navigate their differences, but really come together with something very beautiful and rewarding to each of them.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.